All right. Well, here's a question for you around riots, protests. I'm really torn on these words tonight. So
insurrections.
Let's work it out together.
Okay.
But does the media have a favorite extremist group to dump on and a favorite extremist group to protect? It would seem that is the case. More specifically, does the media favor maybe Antifa against QAnon or white supremacist or alt-right or whatever they label these extremist groups? Yes, they do. We can see that with a tale of two riots or protests, depending on your perspective. Here are the two events that I'm going to discuss right now. Is the January 6th events from 2021 and a violent riot that happened this weekend in downtown Atlanta, 2023. And I'm struggling with this word because one, I think, was a riot. Another does not seem like a riot. One was definitely a riot and not a protest. So I'm going to call them events because I don't want to influence your conclusion. Okay. January 6th versus March 4th. These are the two events. So let's start with January 6th. You may be tired of this by this time, but new news has come out of the January 6th, which is new video from the event in Washington, D.C. that muddies the claim that January 6th was an insurrection. This comes from Monday's episode of Tucker Carlson Tonight, where they received over 40,000 hours of video footage that Carlson and his staff were given by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Here is Carlson's summary.
Turns out there's quite a bit of video you haven't seen, and that video tells a very different story about what happened on January 6th. More than 40,000 hours of surveillance footage from in and around the Capitol have been withheld from the public. And once you see the video, you'll understand why. Taken as a whole, the video record does not support the claim that January 6th was an insurrection.
Part, right?
Yeah.
In fact, it demolishes that claim. And that's exactly why the Democratic Party and its allies in the media prevented you from seeing it.
Okay. Now, one of the more shocking revelations is around the shirtless, horn-wearing man named Jason Chansley. Jacob.
Shaman.
Yes,
shaman,
Jacob Chansley.
And I was just asking, I wanted to make sure we cut out because YouTube will flag it and block it if we were showing people getting beat with
There's
tear
none
gas.
of that. There's none of that.
Okay, just be clear.
That's kind of the point, is that we were already given all of that by the January 6th committees.
It was run on a loop. It was run on a constant loop on CNN and MSNBC of the tear, whatever. I know it was tear gassing or not, but it was the people smashing windows.
Yes.
Like the people.
Now, I have not done a content analysis of all 40,000 hours, but according to the Tucker Carlson show, there is more nonviolence than there is violence. He admits there's some ne'er-do-wells who smashed some windows, but there's far more sort of civilized behavior. Again, we're going to get back to the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley. Here is a picture from him. Incidentally, I took this from Rolling Stone today, and the file name for the image that, leave it up for a second, that Rolling Stone magazine gives this is Visual Language of Hate.
That's how the Rolling Stone labeled it.
The file name when I downloaded it. It's like, all right, I see where you're going. They think that he's a hateful person, that everything on him symbolizes hate. Now, I'm not familiar with the whatever's around his nipple, if that's a
it looks
signet
like the
of
tree
peace.
is that the tree of life on his? I mean, no, I don't want to keep staring at the guy's nipple. Yeah, I don't know.
It does look like it.
Yeah, like the tree of life. Okay.
I don't know. I'm the wrong person to analyze these images, but according to Rolling Stone, all of them are a anthropomorphized vision of hate. Okay. Now, we've all seen images of him, though, video of him sort of chest thumping and yelling. And his, this footage, though, shows the opposite, him calmly walking around as if he is a guest of Capitol Police, as if they are not at all surprised by him, and they are sort of escorting him like you might a guest to a guest bathroom. Watch.
And at the center of it, the single most famous person arrested that day was a Navy veteran from Arizona called Jacob Chansley, often referred to as the QAnon shaman.
The so-called QAnon shaman.
QAnon shaman.
Someone named Q Shaman.
Jacob Chansley became the face of January 6th, a dangerous conspiracy theorist dressed in outlandish costume who led the violent insurrection to overthrow American democracy. For these crimes, Chansley was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison, far more time than many violent criminals now receive. What did Jacob Chansley do to receive this punishment? To this day, there is dispute over how Chansley got into the Capitol building. But according to our review of the internal surveillance video, it is very clear what happened once he got inside. Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides. Here's video of Chansley in the Senate chamber. Capitol Police officers take him to multiple entrances and even try to open locked doors for him. We counted at least 9 officers who were within touching distance of unarmed Jacob Chansley. Not one of them even tried to slow him down. Chansley understood that Capitol Police were his allies. Video shows him giving thanks for them in a prayer on the floor of the Senate. Watch.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving the inspiration needed to these police officers to allow us into the building.
Okay.
To allow us in the building and escort us around. Here's this entrance here. Here's.
Now, a lot of them are kind of on their phone when he walks by, like, horn dude.
Yeah. Oh, there's a horn guy walking by.
Cool.
When you remember, like, back
not
when
the
this
body
first
language
happened,
I would expect.
Go ahead.
I pointed out to you, Clayton, it's getting. I'm sorry, it's getting darker here. I pointed out to you, Clayton, that it was like we were watching Time magazine photographer type photos coming out of there. It's like these were looked like more photo ops than anything, because they had like professional shallow depth of field photos, like it was taken for Time magazine cover. And like that's almost what it looks like. He was on a tour and they were taking him into his little photo ops.
Yeah, and the police were taking selfies. There's plenty of footage now emerging where the police officers are taking selfies with people. People are taking selfies with the police officers. They're taking photos of each other back and forth in this footage. Now,
one of my favorite YouTubers, Viva Frey, and also he's a lawyer. Viva Frey, is that how you think you say it? I don't know. He pointed this out on Twitter. Here are the charges that the Justice Department brought against Jacob Chansley. This video does not track with that. Obstruction of an official proceeding, maybe because this was a day to certify the election, entering and remaining in a restricted building, disorderly and disruptive conduct in a restricted building, violent entry. When did that happen? And disorderly conduct in a Capitol building, parading, demonstrating, or picketing in a Capitol building. So I'm not sure.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, like, when did they like quickly escort all of the senators and congressmen people out like it was like this bad thing then for this person to just walk around? You know what I mean? Like they said that they had to like rush them all out underground and all the other stuff for that. Yeah. Like that makes no sense. That kills that narrative.
Right. It doesn't make sense. Now we don't get timestamps, and it would be nice if we had them, but we don't have interns going through it.
And remember, this is sort of the first tranche of these videos. Like the first they've had, I think he's had them now for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the 40,000 hours. So they probably zeroed in on certain topics, and they're going to continue to release different aspects of this.
Right. So, do these charges hold up or not? I don't know.
4 years in prison?
Yeah, I'm not committed to a narrative that he is a crazy weirdo or a peaceful anything. I just want to know the truth. I'm not saying either side, but this to me does not make him look like whatever crazy that this montage of the right really, or the left really globbed onto as this, what did we call him? Visual language of hate.
According to Rolling Stone.
According to Rolling Stone. CNN, though, is working overtime to protect their narrative of, QAnon shaman as a radical insurgent. But they don't specifically address the conundrum of this footage. Here's the headline they published today. You would think they would be like, oh, we need to air this too. We need to go through this too. We got to get on this, find something that they didn't find. That's normally how it works in the news. When someone breaks a story, the other media outlets try and break it more. That's supposed to be how it works, not discredit them who has broken it. And we continue to see this. This is a brand new phase of journalism, right? Where someone breaks a story, the other media outlets find it uncomfortable, so they shit on it rather than, sorry I said that word, but instead of go and try and, but when we were in the news business, if someone broke a story, we'd be like, we better go dig up more then, have more on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at Watergate, for crying out loud, right? Once the Washington Post ran their particular pieces of the story, the New York Times did everything it could to also confirm and corroborate it and add to the story, right? Take it further.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true with countless other stories. But for whatever reason, the New York Post breaks a story about Hunter Biden's laptop, and then everyone else craps on it and buries it. Now.
Right.
Like that's
instead of reporting it themselves or trying to. I don't understand this because.
Or Seymour Hersh. There's another example, right? Seymour Hersh does the story, and the New York Times ignores it. And everyone else ignores it, doesn't even cover the story.
Now, in this, like, what to know about this footage, that article that I just showed you from Tucker Carlson, they don't address why there's this conundrum. Like, a general reaction would be, hey, we told you this guy was the Tasmanian devil. This footage doesn't show that. We'll report it too and get back to you. Instead, what they're doing is trying to put a hit piece on Tucker Carlson's show. And also, here's this next piece they did today, and a hit piece on Kevin McCarthy for giving it to him.
Tucker Carlson, with the help from Kevin McCarthy, reads the headline, tries to sanitize the very real violence of the January 6th attack.
So they're not addressing the inconsistencies. They're just not going to.
Well, and they could not have, Kevin McCarthy could not have given it to a more polarizing figure for the left. It's like, that's their punching bag is Tucker Carlson.
Right.
And so he kind of had to have known that, but he's also got the biggest audience. So it makes sense to me. And I feel like he's doing a great job of going through it, but it's just like the whole narrative. Like that's something that I wanted to see from the beginning, because I was told there was 14,000 hours, not 44,000 hours. That's a huge, like you're going to be able to see after they go through this footage, the narrative that they created out of the limited footage that they let us see, and the narrative that is actually there. And I'm really actually excited to see where it goes.
Well,
it's easy to do. Social scientists are trained to do what's called a content analysis. Is you just mark down, like, how much is it if it's violent, how much of it is breaking things, how much of it is peaceful. It's easy to do a simple percentage.
Right. Yeah. You'll be able to do that pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not quickly,
and then make it publicly
40,000 hours.
available, and then we can all see it.
This should be a part of the National Archives. Like, why were we kept from seeing this during the January 6th hearings?
Right.
Right?
Remember, Clayton, I just want to point one more thing out. Like, remember, Clayton, when we first started covering this event, there was a video where somebody was handing sticks out of the basement of the Capitol. So, like, I'm wondering if that will resurface again, because you remember we talked about, like, what was that? Like,
and the doors being open. Remember, we saw the gates being removed and like letting people in, but then that video suddenly got scrubbed. We couldn't find it anymore.
Yes.
It was like you couldn't find it anymore.
It's hard to find now. You can barely find it on Rumble. You have to really search for it.
Yeah. Now, again, the moniker around this is the January 6th riots, right? Should we use that word? And what about those inconsistencies from people who, had the most to gain from the popularity of calling it a riot? Liz Cheney, AOC, Nancy Pelosi. Nothing from them out of why there was this sort of peaceful trot around the person that you told us was, leading an insurrection. Okay, so that concludes our discussion of January 6th for now. Inconsistencies, yet media total domination around white supremacist, alt-right, QAnon. Can you think of any other extremist groups they're pinning this on?
No.
All far right.
Proud Boys.
Far right extremists.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? Is the narrative. They're all far right extremists. That's what they want us to think.
Feds.
Now, let's move on to the March 4th. Here is that footage.
This is the Cop City site. Construction vehicles are up in flames. It's like a trailer for the construction crew, about to be up in flames. Smoke bombs. Cops just seem to watch.
Okay, and here's another tiny little clip. Sorry. Okay, what you're seeing there are at least 35 people who were arrested for their participation in a violent riot in downtown Atlanta on Saturday, and at least 23 of them were charged with domestic terrorism. Here's the mugshot that the city of Atlanta released. The group was attacking a police training facility that was under construction. So they blew up the construction site. And then when police tried to stop them, they aimed their fireworks and other projectiles at the police. The group is affiliated with Stop Cop City. So that's what they're calling this police training center, is Cop City. So they've called themselves something that is called Stop Cop City. Not so easy to say. It is an Antifa movement. One of the participants is a lawyer with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has long since said that Antifa is not a domestic terrorist group. The media lets them get away with this. Up until now, the statement by the Atlanta police and Governor Brian Kemp, they don't call this group far extremist. They call them, the governor calls them radical, but they don't use the word Antifa. The local Fox station calls them protesters. So we're allowed to call them protesters, but we're not supposed to say that January 6th participants were protesters. They were rioters. Okay. They didn't, I didn't see equipment being bombed on fire.
Right.
I haven't seen that.
Well,
I didn't see people aiming fireworks at police. Now, there is this, sort of. No, I'm not going to go there. But now the New York Post, let me just point this out, is actually saying that Antifa is responsible for this and that Antifa should, in fact, be labeled an extremist hate group. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say in May of 2020, there was also a riot in Washington where the security shack on the White House lawn got lit on fire. And most people don't even know this even happened. I think it was May 30th or somewhere in there that it happened. It was a George Floyd thing. And they were lighting things and threatened to light a church on fire that was right by the White House. That was never even covered by the mainstream media that I ever saw.
Yes. Now, in Andy No's book, Unmasked.
Here, by the way, sorry. I just wanted to pull up what David's talking about. The White House, when they burned that guard shack, firefighters in D.C. responded to numerous blazes set intentionally by protesters in the city Sunday evening as protests over the death of George Floyd. So these were attacks on the White House guard shack and a church nearby as well, and near the AFL-CIO's headquarters. So there's what David was just referring to.
And do you remember ever hearing anything about that?
No. The Hill covering it because it's right in Washington. No one reads the Hill.
Yeah. Actually, that is in his book. I just sort of searched my notes. So, he dictates, he gives it's sort of a participant observation and a journalistic report of Antifa. And he talks about how a lot of these events are a lot like this. The media sort of apologizes for it. A lot of times they get arrested and released or not arrested at all. Or as in the case of CHOP, which was the occupation in Portland, the police said, we're not even going in there. And he went there, got his butt handed to him, had to go to the hospital, had hemorrhagic bleeding. And the police said, if you go in there, we can't, we're not going to go after you. Because for some reason, the media does not really want to report on Antifa as an extremist group. Because they sort of espouse the values that the media likes, but in a more extreme way, such as environmentalists, gender equality, racial equality, only they are radicalized and they actually train for combat. In this book, he talks time and time again about how, they just sort of are given a pass that the extreme right is absolutely not. Here's what he says about both sides. I'm just going to read my highlights from the book. In fact, misconceptions, he says, misinformation and disinformation abound about Antifa in both the left-wing and right-wing media. On the right, they're portrayed as street hooligans, violent, but also weak, gender-confused, soy boys and girls. On the left, they're characterized as brave heroes who defend their communities against white supremacists and fascists, but neither side capture what they truly are, or the true threat they pose to the American Republic and a liberal democracy. If you're asking, what is this? What does it even mean? He does give a history of how Antifa comes from Europe, Germany specifically, and how it's short for anti-fascism or anti-fascists. He says, simply put, it's an ideology and movement of radical pan-leftist politics whose adherents are mainly militant anarchists, communists, or collective anarchists. Smaller factions of them are socialists who organize through political groups like the Democratic Socialists of America and others. Although he does say, he details time and again how it's not really all that organized. Even when there's like mass gatherings, what they're yelling about is usually different things. There'll be someone there like chanting Black Lives Matter and another person there chanting, about gender equality and TERFs, and another person chanting for something else. And all they stand for collectively is against fascism. And so, thankfully no one was injured at this weekend's riot, but it was one of the more public and visible events from this extremist group. And it points out how the media wants one thing out of one group and nothing out of another, right? I think these are two really important juxtapositions. And they don't care
and it even carries over to social.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was even like, people who are gender critical got booted off of Medium all the time, but extremists, if they're extremist on the left, can use Medium. I was thinking about this recently. I'm like, what is this?
The publishing platform. Medium.
Yeah, the publishing platform.
Well, like someone says in our chat, what's cooking says in our chat here, why aren't their bank accounts frozen like the Canadian truckers' bank accounts were frozen? Right? Like, yeah, no, they get a lot of like the Chaz or Chap, the Occupy Portland. Right.
They had so much pizza, they had to turn it away because people were giving so much donations.
So the GoFundMe accounts, the PayPals, and all those things that were shut down for the Canadian truckers.
They are not extremists. They are well-intentioned. It's like they don't want to call out extremism for fear of throwing the baby out with the ideological bathwater.
Right. But
you can do that if the bathwater, is tinted with the right, I suppose.
With equality and gender equity.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, extremists, they glob onto an idea. They're passionate about it. Maybe it is absolutely well-intentioned at first, and they obsess over it to a point that they think that there's no other option than to tear down the fabric of society because what they're obsessed with is so unacceptable to them.
Right.
And that is true of both sides. And I have empathy for that. You can absolutely get passionate about something. And this is something I think about a lot because Michael Schellenberger's research shows that people who are dissatisfied with their government are more prone to be violent. And so, we point out a lot of holes in the governments we have in modern society, but I would never want to cause somebody so much stress in their life that they would cross that line. And so I take responsibility for how we, cover things because I don't want someone to feel so powerless that like tearing it all down around them seems like the only option for anybody, for no matter the ideology.
Chaz was Seattle, not Portland. Anon Emus says Portland had the siege on the federal courthouse.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I'm getting my events mixed up. There were several. So again, this is extremism, and you can really hate racism so much that you need to throw a concrete milkshake at somebody, which is one of the things that they train with, is like you make a real milkshake with like milkshake ingredients and put quick concrete in it so that when it hits someone's face, it's like, you're going to start drying into concrete. Like a lot of things like this, or pool noodles filled with nails. This is from his book taken by the Portland Police Office after an Antifa event. This is for like swinging around, but also popping tires. So that concludes my tale of two ideologies, two events, two narratives. They're obviously not the same, but when we hold the media to account for how they cover them, it is absolutely unacceptable to have it out for one group and then give the other group a pass when maybe there's something more kind and empathetic we can do to both to talk them down.
Right. And when you're looking at all of this coverage too, 40,000 hours in the media, it just discredits what Tucker Carlson's doing with this footage. They're just, I think in many ways, they're just jealous. But it's also amazing to see their response, CNN's response to this. Like, here's what you should know. Like, we're going to tell you what you should know about Tucker Carlson's footage of the January 6th.
We don't actually want our viewers to know the truth. We want you to know what Fox News is doing.
Right.
Yeah.
This is their agenda. Don't look past, look past our agenda.
Right.
We tell you the news.
Right.
CNN.
It's almost like they're like, oh, should we have wanted this a long time ago? No, we got it from Liz Cheney. We're good.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah, we got it from AOC, so we know what really happened. AOC really thought her life was over that night.
Yeah.
From a different building. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.